My favorite segment of all time, The Real Talks. We finna dive right into it. It's your boy Dame. Subscribe to Dame's World if you haven't. If you have, then appreciate you for rocking with me. We finna keep this train going. If you ain't on the wave, you finna watch the wave leave. That's all I can really say about it. But today's topic is an interesting topic, one of a lot of discussion as of late and in the recent years. And the topic is, can black people be racist? You have both sides of the coin of course black people could be racist, and then you have black people can't be racist, but what you don't hear often is the reasoning from both angles. The perspective, the irrefutable knowledge from both angles to formulate a conclusion and an answer. You don't hear premises set when people establish their position. You just hear, oh, yeah, they can, or no, they can't. You crazy. The argumentation game is so, man, down spiraling that we got to lift this bitch up and we got to learn premises. We got to learn to look at somebody else's argument and see the sense or the logic in it if there is some without refuting it instantly. So, this is why I do real talks and debunk the narrative and shit like that, just because I know there's not a lot of critical thinkers in this world. There are just binary thinkers who choose a side and then defend their side with all their might. And I think as humans, for a better conscious collective, a better pool of meaning in society, we gotta break that chain. We gotta break that mental barrier of not being able to listen to a counter argument. So, with that being said, the topic today is, can black people be racist? First thing we have to ask is the premise. What is a racist? Now, a racist is somebody who believes that their race or any race is superior than other races. At the baseline, that's what a racist is. So, with that notion and that ideology, you have to ask, what system are we in? What does the system perpetuate? And then when you ask that, you'll see what the citizens within the system may or may not inflict. So, racist at its origin was meant to make or make white people look superior. Black people, Africans, Australian Aborigines, brown folk, any folk with melanin, yellow folk, anybody with melanin was deemed inferior, specifically Africans and Australian Aborigines who were African as well. Natives who have African lineages as well. So the origin of a racist was meant to undermine a specific demographic of people. It wasn't meant to undermine everybody. So, with that ideology, because to be a racist is an ideological thing, you have to put it in practice tangibly for it to become racism. Everybody in the world could believe their race is superior, but if it's not practiced, then the concept racism still won't necessarily exist. And I think this is where we get the trouble in discerning whether or not an individual can be racist, because we're not just dealing with individuals, we're dealing with a system and institutions in place that entail racism even deeper than an individual can. So you have to ask, with that definition of racist, believing in a particular race as superior, how do we make racism? So, now if you have a congregate of colonists coming to America or in Western society with this belief that white folks are superior, they're going to put in practices. They're going to create a society that will promote their message. So, this is where we talk about systemic racism. Systemic racism and institutional racism. Systemic is creating things on the basis of the ideology of white superiority and black inferiority. And institution is putting the institutions in place. You have school, the education system, which will teach you that the white person is superior based on all of the accolades. You can't name a black genius because you weren't taught a black genius. All the presidents except Barack, white. All the Congress, all the Senate, all the important people that I should know, the great inventors, the great thinkers that I've learned in this Western society was white. So that's an institution of white supremacy and an institution of racism. The idea is cool, but unless you have it in practice, it's just an idea. Just like anything. You want to build something that's magnificent, and it sounds nice until you build it. Once you build it, then the thought becomes something more. The thought becomes a reality. So you have racism. What's racism? Okay, the practice, again, the practice of discrimination based on color. The practice of discrimination based on color. Again, the question is, can black people be racist? And I'm going to get to that. Y'all got to wait. So, at the system's origin, if it was deemed that a specific group was inferior, then the institutions in place will also promote that. So what does that mean for black people in America? We live in America. We live in the system that we can all agree at the base was rooted on racism and white supremacy. So if black people live in this same system, what makes people think that black people will be exempt from having that viewpoint and concept, from having their beliefs and ideology? We don't exclude the information. We retain information as well when we go into these institutions, learning Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue. We go into these institutions and we also learn that Europeans created electricity. We go into these institutions with them wiping out Kemet and the Egyptian history. So what makes us exempt from looking at ourselves in a racist fashion? Because when we say, can black people be racist, a lot of the times we always try to denote it to racist to white people or other ethnic groups. But if you were groomed in a system, an institution of white supremacy, you might be racist to your own kind. For example, you've seen the studies, if you haven't seen the studies of little babies just doing dolls, picking preferences for dolls. All of the babies pick white dolls. When they ask questions of who's the smart doll of this segment, then you have a whole color spectrum, black, brown, yellow, white. They're like, oh, the white one's smart. Who's not so smart? Oh, the black one. Even little black babies. So you guys have to understand, racism is a learned behavior. Remember, racism is a learned behavior. You're not born out the womb like, hey, black people are inferior. So, be it that it's a learned behavior and black people live in a system of white supremacy, we've learned the behavior to denigrate our own kind. We pick the white doll before the black doll. We associate violence with black people the same way white folks and other folks associate violence with black people. Why? Because the media has taught us so. The stats and the numbers that have been created and perpetuated have told us that black folks are likely to go in prison and in jail and to do crime. So the system in place creates thinkers of that nature, which to me makes black folks definitely racist, but against themselves. That's the trick. And I have to add, when I say racist against themselves, the reason why they're racist against themselves is because it's a system and an institution. And if you're a product of the system and a product of the institution, you're going to promote white superiority in some form or fashion. This is why it's laughable when white people tell me that they're not racist in a system of white supremacy. Because at least the leverage that black folks have is the experience of being black and knowing that they get treated a certain way. Once you have that experience, then you can maybe climb up out of your belief system and your box of thinking that, oh, black people are ignorant or black people are this or uneducated, and having those stigmas because you're now aware that this was deliberately placed upon you and your people. So black people have a better chance to climb out of their own racist ideology against themselves than white people have a chance of climbing out of racism against black people. That's just how it is. So when you have that aspect, you have to talk about black people being racist towards white people, or other people being racist towards white people. Like we just said, if we live in a system that doesn't promote white inferiority, not white superiority, you being told that white people are dumb, white people are uneducated, white people are uncivil, white people are savage. These notions that were told when it came to black people were not told on the other end. So it would be hard pressed for a society, let alone a people, to have the notion that white people are less than, white people are inferior, if it hasn't been taught. Again, it's all learned behavior. So if we live in a system or schooling or the in any field you want to look at is predominantly white, and it doesn't give you off a bad narrative towards white people. So how does one grow up and be like, oh, you know what? They're inferior. They're less than. It almost can't happen. The thought of racism towards white people almost can't happen. And I have to say almost. Why? Because you have systemic and you have institutional racism, but those aren't the only forms of racism. Individual racism. At the end of the day, in this system, within these institutions, I am a person. And I can choose to think however the fuck I want to think. And I can choose to do things however the fuck I want to do things. As a black male, I can choose to view white folks as inferior, or I can learn things to inherit that viewpoint. Of course I don't. Disclaimer for all you motherfuckers who don't peep context that well. But a black person can very well learn things and very well take the mind state to view white folks as inferior. So, with that being said, yes, a black person can be individually racist. Individually racist, right? Even though the system hasn't told them so and it hasn't been drilled and instilled in their mind as much as the original racism. But I'll give the wiggle room to say white people or black people can have that notion because anything is possible. And then with that notion, they can practice racism. If an individual wants to take their liberty, let's say a black person who thinks white people are inferior or wants to treat all white people bad, they can take their liberty, go outside, and just harm white people. That to me is racist. Again, individually. This is what makes it so conflicting, because when people say black people can't be racist, I think what they mean is the institutional and systemic aspect of racism, which is 2 billion times more powerful than what individual racism can do. Like example, if you're in a system of white supremacy, Western society, and you're a black person who's racist against white people, you don't have the power to oppress them. So be it that you don't have the power to oppress them, racism is already out. Remember, we said racism is being racist with the practice. So you on your individual, oh, I hate whitey shit, you ain't making no moves. You ain't changing their lives. When it's the other way, incarceration rates go up. When it's the other way, white folks can vote politically and establish laws that discriminate against us. An individual black racist in a white supremacist society, their vote ain't gonna do shit to stagnate white supremacy. Their actions, yeah, they can whoop ass all across the street, but at the end of the day, how much can they do? So yes, they definitely can, but you have to it's a reductionistic viewpoint to say black people can be racist to white people just because that ain't even how the system was made. So that's going to be the most rare case that you're going to find. A black person going out there miscellaneously and harming white folks. A black person who takes the ideology that white folks are inferior. These are the rarest cases that you will ever see. I'm not saying you won't see it. I've seen it before. I've seen black people claim racial superiority and white inferiority. I've seen it before. But I'd be damned if I haven't seen black people claim themselves as inferior subconsciously more. Subconsciously view white people as superior more, because that's how the system has trained. So you have that aspect, and then you have to ask my good white folks. When you guys say, you guys are racist, look at what you guys do, check. You're out of context too, because you only reduce it to individual racism. That's why you say everybody's racist. Everybody has some, because you guys only reduce it to individual racism and for some reason scoff over the systemic and institutional racism as if that wasn't the last 500 years. I don't know why you guys act like institutional and systemic racism don't exist and that makes the individuals racist, but for some reason you guys want to reduce it only to individual racism, which is why you can have the audacity to say black people are just as racist as white people. No, the concept of racism in itself don't work in reverse the way you guys think it. So when you guys say racism, I need y'all examples. I need y'all examples. Because somebody going on Facebook and saying white people be like, if that's your definition of racist, then cry me a fucking river. If your definition of racism is just talking about white people, saying words, calling people Karens, because these are prejudices at best, but they don't infringe on your livelihood. Those comments, those thoughts don't deem you inferior. So the notion, when going back, are black people racist? Yes. We've grown up in a society of white supremacy. The catch is we're racist to our own black people the same way all Americans are racist to black people. The same way all of the nation in which has been colonized deems black people as ghetto, improper, thieves, criminals, uneducated. The same black people here have inherited those views, and everybody here has to break away from those chains. Not just white folks, everybody has to break away from the chains of reducing a brother to a certain action, of reducing a brother to a certain capacity mentally, of reducing a brother to only physical capabilities. As if athleticism isn't intelligent. See somebody slicing through a defense in 0.2 seconds, that's a form of intellect that tells the body to do something. But that's all beside the point. We have to really just assess what we're saying out here. For black people to be racist to white people, they would have to literally go against the grain in which they live in and have to be educated in a manner of past Eurocentric thought into Afrocentric thought to learn about certain things that may entail them to think, okay, we have a gift that they don't have, and then they may deem white folks inferior, which you almost never see. I rarely see black people who believe white folks are inferior. I see white folks, black folks, brown folks, yellow folks who subconsciously look at black folks as inferior. That's how the construct was made. 19 minutes, approaching 20 minutes. I don't want to ramble for too long, but can black people be racist? Yes. I think the catch is we all are racist towards black people. That's just how the construct was made once European colonization came about. That's the ideology, one of the main ideologies within our system in place. In reverse, you don't see it as frequent for white people to be viewed as inferior because it's not taught nowhere. Where are we going to learn that? White inferiority. Where are we going to learn that? Where? In order to have that ideology. If we can agree that racism is a practice, racism is practiced and learned where are we going to learn that in reverse? Individual racism, yes, blacks can be individually racist to whites, but that ain't much. And that's rare because it's not taught. So let me know your thoughts, your comments. Can black folks be racist? You have my answer. I'll say it one more time. Yes, they can be racist. They are racist to black folks, just like the system was created. And they can be individually racist to white folks if they somehow inherit the notion that white folks are inferior and if they use their power and their choices to practice that discrimination. It's your boy Dane, man.